Have you ever felt like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, as if you're alone in your pain, searching for answers but finding none? What if I told you that there is someone who sees every tear you shed and hears every cry of your heart? Maybe you're wondering, if God really sees me, why doesn't he answer? The truth is, God's silence doesn't mean his absence. Many times, he is working behind the scenes in ways we can't even imagine. Close your eyes for a moment. Think about your greatest fear, your biggest uncertainty. Now, imagine if there were a way to turn that anxiety into peace. Would you trust the process, or would you keep trying to carry everything on your own? Believe this: God not only sees your pain, but he also has a purpose for every difficult moment. What seems like a delay might actually be preparation. What looks like a no could be a yes to something far greater. Maybe you're tired. Maybe it feels like your prayers are going unheard. You look around, and everything seems uncertain. But what if God's silence isn't rejection, but an invitation to trust him more? How many times have you asked yourself, when will it be my turn? What if the answer isn't just in waiting, but in how you see the waiting? Today, you'll discover truths that can transform your faith journey and bring clarity to the season you're in. There's a key that can change the way you face your challenges, a truth that few understand, but that has the power to completely transform your life. So go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to keep receiving messages that strengthen your faith. And in the comments, write, "God sees me and I trust him," to declare your confidence in his plan. Now, let's dive into how God sees your pain and hears your cry. Pain has a way of making us feel isolated, as if no one truly understands what we're going through. But what if that silence didn't mean abandonment? God sees every tear that falls on your pillow and hears even the prayers you can't put into words, the heaviness in your heart, the silent cry, the feeling that no one cares. He notices it all. Think of a father watching his child learn to walk. He doesn't prevent every fall, but he's always there to help them get back up. God does the same for us. So often, we expect immediate answers, clear signs that God is at work, but we forget that he operates in the unseen. Imagine a sculptor working on a block of marble. Each strike of the chisel might seem like destruction, but in the end, a masterpiece emerges. God's silence isn't neglect. It's refinement. No prayer goes unheard, even when there's no immediate response. Every plea, every whisper, every unspoken sorrow is recorded in heaven. Remember, despair doesn't have to be a dead end. It can be a turning point. Moses felt lost in the wilderness. Job watched his world fall apart. David cried out in distress, yet they were all heard. The key: they kept seeking God. If your burden feels too heavy, try this practical step. Write down your worries on a piece of paper and surrender them to God in prayer. It may seem simple, but externalizing your pain while reaffirming your faith can shift your perspective. And when it feels like nothing is changing, patience becomes a challenge, but it is also the key. Because in the end, waiting isn't just about time, it's about transformation. Faith isn't just believing that God can act, it's trusting that he is acting even when we don't see it. Many of us want to see before we believe, but the real challenge is trusting the invisible. Just like a farmer plants seeds and patiently waits for the harvest, we must learn to trust in God's timing. Waiting can be uncomfortable, but every moment serves a greater purpose. Faith without patience is like a boat without a rudder. It might stay afloat, but it will never reach its destination. Patience isn't passive, it's an active exercise in trust. Think about Joseph in Egypt, betrayed, sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned. Everything seemed to be against him. Yet in every stage, God was working behind the scenes, and when the time was right, Joseph was elevated to the position of governor over Egypt. Now ask yourself, how many times has impatience led you to act too soon and later regret it? Learning to wait protects us from making rushed mistakes and teaches us to rely more on God. But how do we remain patient when our hearts are anxious? One practical way is to replace worry with prayer. Instead of using your energy trying to predict the future, invest that time in strengthening your faith. Read stories of biblical figures who endured seasons of waiting, like Abraham, who waited years for the promise of a son, or Hannah, who cried out for a child until Samuel was born. If they endured, so can you. And when the waiting feels endless and it seems like God has forgotten, that's when growth happens. Because every great promise must pass through the test of time before it is fulfilled. Waiting is never comfortable. It tests our patience, challenges our faith, and often makes us wonder if God is really listening. But think about this. A farmer doesn't plant a seed today and harvest it tomorrow. There's an invisible process happening underground. Roots growing stronger, the soil adjusting, life developing where the eyes can't see. In the same way, a season of waiting isn't wasted time, it's a time of preparation. What God is cultivating in you now may be the foundation for something much greater in the future. Every waiting season carries a hidden lesson. Look at David, anointed as king while he was still young, yet he had to endure years of trials and struggles before taking the throne. Why? Because before leading a nation, he needed to learn how to lead himself. How often do we want the promise without the process? But without maturity, even the greatest blessing can become a burden. Waiting teaches us resilience, shapes our character, and prepares us to handle what we've been praying for. But how can we turn waiting into real growth? One way is to invest in yourself while you wait. If you're praying for a new job, why not take time to develop new skills? If you desire a strong and blessed relationship, why not work on becoming the best version of yourself before expecting someone else to fill the gaps in your life? Waiting can be a time of building, not just externally but internally as well. And when the wait feels too long, the Bible is full of promises for those who trust in the Lord. It is in His Word that we find the strength to keep going. When life gets hard and your heart feels heavy, where do you turn for refuge? Many people look for answers in empty advice, temporary distractions, or even desperation. But there is an endless source of hope and wisdom, the Word of God. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This means that no matter how deep the pain or how overwhelming the sorrow, there is rest available for those who trust in Him. The Bible isn't just an old book. It's a living guide for difficult times. Lamentations chapter 3, verses 25 and 26 tells us, "The Lord is good to those who wait for Him, to the soul who seeks Him." It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. In other words, patience and faith go hand in hand. And even when God seems silent, He is still present. If you've ever felt like your prayers don't go beyond the ceiling, remember this. The answer may not come immediately, but God's presence never fails. But how can we make reading the Bible a practical and transformative habit? It's not just about reading mechanically. It's about absorbing and applying what we learn. If you're seeking comfort, start with Psalms. If you need wisdom, turn to Proverbs. If you want to learn more about Jesus, read the Gospels. If you're struggling with anxiety, Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7 teaches about finding peace in the midst of worry. And beyond just reading, reflect on it, pray about it, and put it into practice in your daily life. And when the words feel like just letters on a page, that's where resilience comes in. Because the Bible doesn't just comfort us, it strengthens us to face tough times. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Pain comes without warning, challenges multiply, and faith often wavers. But it's in these moments that resilience becomes essential. Being resilient doesn't mean ignoring the pain or pretending everything is fine. It means learning to rise again after every fall. Just like an athlete pushes their muscles to exhaustion to grow stronger, our trials serve to strengthen our faith. God doesn't allow challenges to break us, but to equip us for something greater. The story of Job is one of the greatest examples of this. He lost everything, his family, his health, his possessions, yet he remained faithful. His secret? He understood that his pain wasn't the final chapter, but just part of the story God was writing. When we face crises, our instinct is to ask, why is this happening to me? But what if the better question is, what is God teaching me through this? Changing our perspective doesn't erase the pain, but it gives us strength to keep moving forward. So how can we develop resilience in a practical way? First, stop trying to fight alone. Surround yourself with people who strengthen your faith, seek guidance in difficult moments, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Second, turn adversity into learning. If a plan failed, what can you adjust? If a door closed, is there another one God is opening? Write down moments when God has sustained you in the past, because remembering past victories builds confidence for future battles. And when it feels like everything is falling apart, remember that every growth process goes through fire before revealing something precious. And that's exactly how God shapes us to fulfill His purpose. Nothing truly valuable comes without a process. Gold must go through fire to be purified, diamonds need pressure to be refined, and a sword only gains its strength after being shaped in intense heat. In the same way, God prepares us before revealing His purpose. So often, we want the blessing without the preparation, the promise without the refining process. But in His wisdom, God works in us before working through us. What feels like pain today might be exactly what equips us for the future. Look at Moses. He was born with an extraordinary calling, yet he had to spend 40 years in the desert before leading the people of Israel. Why? Because before guiding a nation, he needed to learn how to depend on God. The desert wasn't a punishment, it was a training ground. How many times, in the middle of trials, do we think God has forgotten us, when in reality He is preparing us? God's silence is not rejection, it's an invitation to trust Him more. But how can we know if we're being shaped? Pay attention to recurring challenges. If you constantly struggle with financial difficulties, perhaps God is teaching you about stewardship and generosity. If you frequently face difficult relationships, maybe He is shaping your patience and love for others. Instead of asking, why me? Try asking, what for? Understanding the purpose changes everything. And when the preparation feels endless, remember, God never wastes pain. Every process He allows has a purpose, and sometimes the greatest miracles happen precisely in the waiting. What looks like a delay might actually be a strategic detour towards something greater. We often get frustrated when things don't happen in our timing, forgetting that God sees the bigger picture. He knows the perfect moment to act. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days when Jesus arrived, and to everyone it seemed like it was too late. But what looked like a delay was actually preparation for an even greater miracle. If Jesus had arrived earlier, they would have witnessed a healing. But because He arrived at the right time, they witnessed a resurrection. How many times do we pray for something and, when we don't receive it immediately, assume that God has forgotten us? But what if what we call a delay is actually protection? Have you ever thought that the closed door may have saved you from a bigger problem? Or that the no that hurt so much was actually a yes to something much better? Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and thrown into prison unjustly, yet every obstacle was a step toward his destiny as a ruler in Egypt. What seemed like a setback was actually the construction of his purpose. So how do we hold on to hope when everything seems stuck? First, change your perspective. Instead of complaining about the wait, ask yourself, what can I learn during this time? Second, don't stop moving forward. Keep preparing, keep praying, keep believing. A farmer doesn't dig up the soil every day to check if the seed is growing. He trusts the process. And we should trust God in the same way, knowing that at the right time the harvest will come. And when the waiting feels too long, remember, the story isn't over. God is still writing chapters you can't even imagine. And often, the miracle you've been waiting for has already begun, even if your eyes can't see it yet. Now that you understand that God sees your pain, hears your cries, and has a purpose for every moment of your life, let me ask you, are you truly willing to trust Him? Or will you keep carrying this burden alone? Faith isn't just believing when everything is going well. It's standing firm when everything feels uncertain. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you let doubt control you, or will you choose to trust in God's timing and His silence? The greatest miracles happen to those who don't give up halfway. Joseph waited years to see his dreams fulfilled. Job lost everything before receiving double in return. What looks like a delay may actually be divine alignment. So ask yourself, what might God be teaching me in this season? Instead of complaining about the waiting, why not see it as training for something greater? And remember, God didn't bring you this far to abandon you. He sees every tear, hears every prayer, and even when He seems silent, He is working. The answer may not come the way you expect, but it will always come in the right way. Your part is to trust, take action, and never give up. Are you ready to take this step of faith? If this message encouraged you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want to keep learning about faith, patience, and living out God's purpose, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what's the biggest lesson you took from this message? I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video. God bless you.